The plan was risky. Reckless, some might even say. But if there was ever a moment to gamble everything I'd built, it was now. I needed something bigger than a rebuttal, bigger than defense. I needed a victory so undeniable that no lawsuit, no whisper campaign, no Kensington manipulation could overshadow it. That's when I saw it, a federal contract opening for bids. A sprawling infrastructure project, a $2.5 billion redevelopment of the waterfront. The kind of deal that only titans dared compete for. The Kensington Group had been circling it for months, bragging at dinner parties, leaking to the press about how it was practically theirs, which made it the perfect battlefield. My team thought I was out of my mind when I called the emergency meeting. "You want to go after the waterfront?" Daniel asked, eyebrows raised. "Julie, this isn't just another project. This is, well, it's a declaration of war." "Exactly," I said, voice steady. "And if we win it, no one will ever again question Red Cannon's legitimacy. Not investors. Not the press. And definitely not the Kensingtons." There was silence, then slow nods. My staff wasn't naive. They knew what was at stake. But they also trusted me. Trusted that I hadn't led them wrong before, and wouldn't now. The following weeks were a blur of blueprints, strategy sessions, midnight revisions. I personally pitched to every subcontractor we needed, every engineer worth their salt. Not just with numbers, but with vision. "This isn't just concrete and steel," I told them, standing in front of the schematics. "This is a chance to reshape an entire city. To build something that lasts. To do it right, not the Kensington way, cutting corners for profits, but the Red Cannon way." One by one, they signed on. Not because we were the biggest player, but because we were the hungriest. When bid day came, the Kensingtons strutted into the hall like royalty, dripping confidence. Caroline flashed her signature smile to the cameras. Matthew swaggered with his leather briefcase. They didn't even acknowledge me, as if ignoring me could make me disappear. But when the bids were unsealed, their smiles faltered. Our proposal wasn't just competitive. It was visionary. A plan that balanced cost with innovation, efficiency with sustainability. And, thanks to years of careful planning and reserves, I undercut their bloated numbers without sacrificing quality. The murmurs started immediately. Reporters typing furiously. Contractors whispering. For once, the Kensingtons weren't the center of gravity in the room. I was. The award wouldn't be announced for weeks, but the narrative had already shifted. Headlines that night read, "Red Cannon challenges Kensington Group in billion-dollar waterfront bid. Underdog empire stuns industry with bold proposal." Is the Kensington dynasty losing its grip? I watched the coverage from my office, a quiet satisfaction settling in. For years, they had erased me. For years, they had claimed my ideas, my work, my blood and sweat as their own. Now I had walked into their arena, stared them down, and shown the world that I wasn't just their forgotten daughter. I was their rival. And if the Kensingtons thought they could intimidate me back into silence, they had just learned the hardest truth of all. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was rewriting it. I knew the Kensingtons wouldn't take my move lightly. What I didn't expect was how fast they'd strike back. 2 days after the bids were unsealed, one of my subcontractors called me in a panic. "Julie, I'm sorry," he stammered. "We're pulling out. We got a better offer. An exclusive arrangement with the Kensingtons." I gripped the phone tighter. "How much did they pay you to walk away?" A pause. Then, quietly, "Enough to keep my business alive for the next 5 years. Click. By the end of the week, 3 more subcontractors had dropped, each giving flimsy excuses. Behind every excuse, I heard the same truth: Kensington money. They weren't just fighting me in court or in the press. They were trying to starve my project before it even began. Then the threats started. Anonymous emails. Blocked numbers. My assistant found a note slipped under the office door. "Walk away before it's too late." For a moment, old fear clawed at me. That familiar voice whispering that I didn't belong, that I couldn't win against them. But then I thought of the years I'd spent being erased, of the nights I stayed up building Red Cannon while they laughed at me. And I thought of my team, the people who had chosen me, who had stayed when walking away would have been easier. I wasn't backing down. I called Daniel and my leadership staff into the boardroom. The air was heavy with unease. Rumors of sabotage were already swirling. They're scared, I told them simply. That's why they're coming at us so hard. But fear makes people sloppy. And the more desperate they get, the more we can use it against them. I laid out a contingency plan, doubling down on supplier diversity, recruiting smaller subcontractors eager to prove themselves, tightening security protocols. They want us rattled, I said. But instead, we'll show them we're adaptable. One of my project managers raised her hand. Julie, what if they come after you personally? I didn't hesitate. Then I'll remind them I'm not the little girl they used to dismiss. I'm the woman who built Red Cannon. And I don't scare easily. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, nods of agreement. That night, alone in my office, I let the mask slip. My chest ached with the weight of it all. The lawsuits, the smear campaigns, the sabotage. The knowledge that my own blood was orchestrating every attack. But there was something else beneath the ache, a fire. Because if they thought this would break me, they still hadn't learned the truth. I'd spent my whole life surviving without their approval, without their handouts, without their so-called protection. Now I was thriving in spite of them. And if the Kensingtons wanted war, I was ready to meet them on every battlefield, courtroom, boardroom, construction site. This time they wouldn't erase me. This time, I'd erase the illusion that they had ever been untouchable. The summons came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a stone-faced courier who refused to meet my eyes. Deposition scheduled. Julie Kensington, Red Cannon Construction. The words stared up at me from the page, stark and cold. I knew it was coming. My lawyers had warned me. Still, seeing it in black and white made my stomach clench. Depositions weren't about truth. They were about traps. And the Kensingtons were masters of both. The day arrived gray and wet, the kind of morning that seemed to press down on the city like a weight. I dressed carefully, a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back, makeup minimal. Not too soft, not too severe. I wanted to project exactly what I was, calm, competent, and unshakable. The law offices were downtown, all glass and chrome, cold enough to make me feel like I'd walked into a shark tank. Inside the conference room, the Kensingtons were already seated. My father at the head of the table, regal as ever, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Caroline, all pearls and polished smiles, pretending this was just another society luncheon. Matthew, leaning back with smug arrogance, eyes gleaming like he couldn't wait to pounce. They didn't look at me as I entered, as if I were still invisible. But when I sat down across from them, opened my folder, and met their eyes one by one, I saw it, the flicker of unease. They'd expected me rattled. Instead, I was steel. The opposing counsel began. Their questions came sharp and rapid-fire. Did you or did you not use contacts obtained through your family to establish Red Cannon? No, my voice was steady. Did you ever access Kensington Group resources while building your company? No. Isn't it true that you relied on Kensington introductions to secure your first contracts? I leaned forward. It isn't true. And I can provide documentation to prove it. Pages rustled. My lawyer slid a binder forward. Contracts, emails, payment records. Clean. Unassailable. Matthew's smirk faltered. Caroline's jaw tightened. But my father, he didn't flinch. He studied me the way a chess master studies the board, already planning 10 moves ahead. When the opposing counsel shifted tactics, I felt his influence in the questions. They weren't about facts anymore. They were about undermining me. Would you describe yourself as emotionally stable, Ms. Kensington? Yes. Have you ever sought therapy? Yes. For stress management. So, you admit to having mental health issues? I narrowed my eyes. I admit to being human. And unlike this family, I don't see therapy as a weakness. For the first time, Caroline's composure cracked. Her lips pressed thin, and I almost smiled. The hours dragged, questions circling back like vultures. But I didn't break. Every answer was measured, deliberate, backed by paper and proof. By the end, I could see it in their faces. They hadn't landed the blow they'd hoped for. As we stood to leave, Matthew leaned close, his whisper sharp enough to cut. You think you've won something? This is just the beginning. I looked him square in the eye. I know. And I'm still here. Walking out of that glass tower, I felt the exhaustion settle deep in my bones. But beneath it, stronger than the fatigue, was resolve. They could drag me into 100 rooms like that. They could smear, sabotage, intimidate. I wasn't the daughter who sat silent in family meetings anymore. I was the woman across the table. And they couldn't erase that. By the next morning, my face was everywhere. Not because of what I'd said in the deposition, but because of how the Kensingtons had framed it. Heiress admits to therapy and heated deposition. Julie Kensington confirms use of family resources. Red Cannon's stability questioned amid legal battle. It was a masterclass in spin. Take my words out of context, strip them of proof, and paint me as unstable, dependent, untrustworthy. I tossed the newspaper onto the counter, my coffee untouched. They're terrified, Daniel said from across the table. That's why they're twisting it this hard. You held your ground yesterday, and they know it. I wanted to believe him, but the calls told a different story. One investor demanded reassurance. Another requested to pause pending funds. A supplier emailed to ask if Red Cannon would still exist in 6 months. The smear campaign was doing its job, seeding doubt, eroding trust. By noon, I'd had enough. I called an emergency press conference. Standing at the podium, cameras flashing, I forced myself to breathe steady. Yes, I confirmed I've been in therapy, I began, voice clear. Because leadership carries pressure. Because mental health matters. If the Kensington Group believes therapy disqualifies someone from leading, that says more about their values than it does about me. A ripple went through the crowd. Surprise, then scribbling pens. And as for the claim that Red Cannon used Kensington resources, here, I held up a binder. Every contract, every invoice, every email. Audited, verified, transparent. Red Cannon wasn't built on family money. It was built on hard work, grit, and a team that refuses to be erased. Flashes popped, questions erupted, but I didn't waver. By evening, the headlines shifted. Julie Kensington pushes back, challenges family's values. Red Cannon founder releases proof of independence. Is therapy a weakness or strength? It wasn't a total victory, but it was enough. Enough to steady the ship, enough to keep my investors from bolting, enough to remind the world that I wasn't hiding. But I knew better than to celebrate. Because later that night, as I sat alone in my office, my lawyer called. They're not slowing down, she warned. The Kensingtons have filed for expedited discovery. They want access to your internal communications, contracts, even personal records. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pressing down on me. They wanted to strip me bare, dig until they found something. Anything. They could twist into a weapon. For a moment, I let myself feel the weight of it. The loneliness. The sheer relentlessness of being at war with the people who should have loved me most. But then I opened my eyes, staring at the skyline outside my window. They could spin, smear, sabotage. But every time they came at me, I came back stronger. And I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The subpoenas landed like grenades. Emails, contracts, financial records, fine, I expected that. But when they demanded my personal journals, private messages, even therapy notes, my breath caught in my throat. This is harassment, my lawyer snapped when the papers arrived. We'll fight it, but they're trying to drown you in invasiveness. They want you rattled. It was working. By the third night in a row of combing through documents for my legal team, I felt my chest tighten. My hands trembled as I flipped through binders, the words blurring on the page. Daniel noticed. Julie, he said softly, you need to rest. You can't keep running like this. I don't have a choice, I muttered. But when I finally stumbled home near dawn, my reflection in the mirror startled me. Hollow eyes. Sharp cheekbones. A stranger staring back. I told myself it was temporary. Just a phase. But the cracks were spreading. At work, my patience thinned. A project manager asked a simple question and I snapped. My assistant made a scheduling mistake and I barked at her. The looks on their faces gutted me, but the words were out before I could stop them. That evening, My phone buzzed with a message from a friend I hadn't seen in weeks. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you. Just checking in." I stared at it, guilt knotting in my stomach. I hadn't replied to half the people who cared about me. I hadn't let anyone in. Because if I did, I feared the dam would break. The Kensingtons weren't just attacking my company. They were bleeding me dry, inch by inch, hoping I'd collapse under the weight. But even in the exhaustion, even in the loneliness, something inside me refused to bend. Late one night, after my staff had gone home, I walked through Red Cannon's offices. The blueprints pinned to the walls, the models on the tables, the hum of possibility in every corner. It reminded me why I started this. Not to beat the Kensingtons. Not to prove myself to them. But because I believed in building something real, something lasting, something better. They could come for my records. They could drag my name through mud. They could push me until my body ached and my voice cracked. But they couldn't touch the truth of what I'd built. Still, as I locked the office and stepped into the quiet night, I couldn't shake the unease. Because while I was holding the line, I was fraying at the edges. And the Kensingtons were experts at finding weaknesses. The question wasn't whether they'd notice. It was when.